I'm immobile, so I apologize in advance for any formatting issues, but this happened about a week ago. I go to school in a pretty safe city, though there recently has been some less than safe things going on. An assault, murder, rumors of human trafficking. I'm driving home for the holiday, and I usually take a more back roadway instead of taking the highway, because I like to avoid this one part of the highway due to traffic. I notice that my gas tank is looking a bit low, so I decide to stop at the nearest gas station, which happens to be in the middle of nowhere. There are no streetlights. I can't remember the last time I saw a house, and it's just surrounded by woods. I've been to this gas station before. It's the one I stop at every time I head home because the gas is usually cheap, and it's a nice brief stopping point to check in with my folks and let them know where I am and whatnot. Anyways, I finish pumping gas and drive my car up to the parking spot so I can get some snacks for the road and something to eat, because I have a long drive ahead of me and I was hungry. I go and sit down to eat, and as I'm eating my sandwich with a clear view of my car, and this car pulls up next to mine and two men get out. They start examining my car, but they start looking at the back of my car's window where I have my university parking decal, which clearly says what school I go to, where I park, and the dorm area I live in. Then they start peeping in my windows, and I had a few dresses out in the back seat. So at this point, it's fairly obvious to anyone that the car belongs to a college-aged, presumably female person. They're doing a thorough examination of my car, looking at the sides, the front, checking my tires. Alarm bells are ringing in my head, and I have a gut feeling that this isn't right. I toss my sandwich and get my pepper spray in hand and leave the store. The two men hear the bell of the door ding and immediately get in their car and drive off pretty quick. My first thought was that maybe I hit them or they hit me and were checking for damage, but I didn't see any at all, and they had pulled in a solid 10 minutes after me. I have no idea what they were up to, but nonetheless, it was unsettling and rather creepy.
Hi, I guess I should congratulate you on your new gig. Knowing the nature of it, I'm not so sure if I should feel happy for you or pity you. I'm the last person who occupied this office. I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to ask any questions about me, and I advise you don't. You don't want to get on their bad side. I know my time is running out soon. I just know it. You'll see what I'm talking about later. I can't explain how, but I know I will soon be eliminated. So, I figured I'd make myself useful and leave the next person to take over a guide. Read the following list as many times as it takes for you to memorize it, then get rid of it by tearing it apart and eating the shredded paper. I'm sorry, but unfortunately, it's 100% necessary if you value your life. 1. Always keep this office door closed. When you leave, lock it, even if you're going away for 2 minutes. 2. Don't search for signs of humanity in the subjects. Trust me, it's only going to make things harder. 3. Carry headphones with noise cancelling. They will make your job a lot easier. 4. Never eat anything from the canteen, except for the wrapped candy. Everything else is a safety hazard. Be sure to bring your own food. 5. In the office next to you, there is a woman with blue eyes and dark hair. Do not interact with her. If she starts asking you questions, retreat back to your office and lock the door. 6. Disregarding rule number 2. If you notice a special birthmark under the left eye of one subject, the subject is 6.1 feet tall. Find a way to get rid of him. Don't feel guilty. It's an act of mercy. 7. Make sure the subjects never learn your name. 8. There's a mask hanging on the wall of the office. Always put it under the special safety gear when interacting with the subjects. 9. When going through files on your computer, it's best to turn off the computer every half hour. 10. When reopening the computer, if the photos in the subject's files have changed, as in changes in positions, eyes, opening, closing, etc., close the computer and contact IT immediately. 11. The subjects are not screaming. They are yawning. Keep this mantra in mind and repeat it quietly in your head if necessary. Never say the mantra out loud. 12. There is a loose floorboard in this office. Under the floorboard, you will find a gun. The floorboard is located under the trash can. When you get the feeling that they're seeking to get rid of you, take the gun and put as many bullets to your head as possible. Do not, and I repeat, do not use any other method of suicide. Try to damage as much of the brain tissue as possible. In that way, you will avoid turning into a subject. Good luck. I hope you stay alive longer than I did.
My name is Nicholas Abernathy. My friends call me Nick. I am 32 years old with a very, very, very sound mind. I am not crazy. Although crazy people don't know they're crazy, I am 99% sure I am not. About a year ago, I lived at 253 Dead Man's Lane in a small town in Delaware. I can't remember the name, but that is where this story took place. There's a reason they call it Dead Man's Lane. I know that now. I don't live there anymore. I now reside at an undisclosed location due to the events that occurred at my previous residence. I don't want them to know where I am. I hope you understand. The town was a very small town, a one-stoplight town, a town so small that if you blink while driving through, you'll miss it, which was perfect for me. It was a welcomed escape from the hustle and bustle of city life, which was slowly draining me to the point of exhaustion. So when my boss at the time came to me and said that our company was downsizing and that I would be let go, I gladly took the severance package and moved on with my life. I grew up in a small town, so I was familiar with the quiet and simplicity that it offered, and I longed to go back there again. So while sitting in my big city apartment, I grabbed my laptop and started to search small town living, houses for sale and things of that sort. I came upon an old Victorian house built in 1859. It was beautiful. Dark blue with dark grey trim, 2 floors, balcony, front porch and a very small room at the top of the house with an octagon-shaped window in it. For some unknown reason, I've always wanted to live in such a house, so this was like a dream come true. The price wasn't bad. Actually, it was pretty good. Low, some might say. So I called the number displayed in the ad and made arrangements with the older gentleman on the other end to come view the house 3 days later. Upon arriving at the house, it looked just like the picture in the ad, except there was one small detail the ad didn't say. The house was in the middle of a giant dirt field all by itself. No trees or shrubbery around, just a dirt field. That time of year, some farmer should have corn or something growing in a field like that, but there was nothing. This struck me as kind of odd. The only thing besides the house in the field was one electric pole with wires running from it to the house and a transformer on top. The driveway was at least a quarter mile long, with other little roads branching off of it going to certain parts of the field, then connecting back to the main driveway. One road wrapped around the whole entire house. It seemed like forever to get there. Once there I met an old man who said his name was Bernie, or Benny, or something starting with a B. I can't really remember. He said he was the owner of the house and that I can feel free to look around if I wanted. I asked if he was coming in. His face turned pale, as he said, "No, I'll stay right here, thank you." Looking back now, that should have been a red flag. An owner that wouldn't go into his own house. Red flag alert. But I was naive and I blew it off. I entered the house alone. I expected it to be a little run down and dirty, given the dirt field that surrounded it, but to my surprise it was immaculately clean, completely furnished, and looking like something straight out of a magazine. I went through each room in total awe of its beauty. Each room except the little room with the octagon window. I couldn't find a door or staircase leading to it. This too I found a little odd. And the basement. I've never been a big fan of basements, so I figured I'll go check it out at some point. What's the big deal? It's a basement. I met up with the old man outside and we discussed and agreed on a price. He informed me that everything in the house was included in the deal under one condition. No furniture could be removed from the house or moved to any other part of the home. Everything must stay exactly where it is. I could use any of the appliances, books and things of that sort, but they must be returned to exactly where they are now. I could add to it too, but nothing could be removed. Given that all the furniture and such was from the Victorian era, I thought why get rid of it, and agreed to this condition, an agreement I would later regret. Moving in day was exciting for me. I finally got the house of my dreams. I just started a new job and I'm back to the quiet life. I left all my furniture and stuff at my old apartment, only packing my clothes and toiletries. I figured maybe the next guy or girl could use some of it. I met the old man at the house. I'm just going to call him Mr. B since I can't seem to remember the man's name. I later found out that Mr. B lived just 2 blocks away with his wife of 43 years, Isabella. I never got the chance to meet Isabella, although I wish I had. He was an old steel mill worker. You could tell from his physique. He may have been old, but that man had muscle. He had bought the house some 30 years back with the same conditions that he had told me. He never lived in the place. Said it troubled his wife immensely from the first day she saw it. He tried to sell it many times before, but the deals always fell through for some reason. Until then. Mr. B handed me the keys, and as he did so, he grabbed hold of my hand hard and pulled me to him and whispered in my right ear, "Beware of the rain." There's a reason he said that to me, I know that now. He then hung his head and slowly walked away. How he knew, I don't know, but he did. My first couple of weeks in my new house were rather uneventful. The weather was nice with a slight breeze. I even opened a couple of windows upstairs to get some airflow in there. I asked Mr. B about opening the windows. He said that was fine since they were part of the house and not possessions within the house, so I left them open for a few days. On my first night since the place was fully furnished, I hung up my clothes, which took all of 20 minutes. I put my shampoos and such in the master bathroom, which was almost as big as my bedroom, then went to the local grocery store for some food and drinks. I spent the rest of the time checking out each room one by one and seeing everything the house had to offer. About a week or so later, I finally found the door that led to the little room with the octagon window. It was a secret door panel hidden in the closet of the room that I decided to make my bedroom. For some unknown, strange reason, something told me to push on the back of the closet, so I did, and the door swung open, revealing a black spiral metal staircase that led to said room. It was a very small room, about the size of a walk-in closet by today's standards. Inside was a very old desk positioned just under the octagon window, and a stand-up lamp to its left. There was old wooden panelling along the walls as well as the ceiling. The floor, however, looked to be brand new hardwood. I decided to make it into my office, the place I would do my writing, since I had a great view of the dirt field out the window. The rest of her house consisted of 5 bedrooms, a huge kitchen, a parlour, a living area, 3 full bathrooms, a study and a basement. Oh, that basement. I decided to check it out one night. I was bored and needed something to do. That was a bad idea. The basement was kinda creepy. I'm lying, it was really creepy. The door to the basement had little holes all along the edges. At the top, the bottom, and to the right side of the door, like someone had nailed it shut some years ago. The stairs leading down to the basement were old and rickety, and looked like they would fall apart at any given moment, unlike the rest of the house that was immaculately clean. The basement, however, was not. There was dust and dirt and cobwebs everywhere. It had a strange odour. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I know now. Along the far wall there was a series of 5 filing cabinets that were covered in dust. Over to the right there was what looked like 2 metal surgical tables covered in white sheets. In the middle of these tables was a small stand with a large glass container that had tubes running out of it and some kind of a pump machine behind it. All kinds of knives, gloves and masks were scattered all over the floor. It looked like no one had been down here for a long time. I ran up the stairs as quickly as I could, shut the basement door and never went down there again. What was that place? About a month or so went by. All this time I couldn't get what Mr. B had whispered to me on the day I moved in out of my head. Every morning whilst drinking my coffee I would check the weather app on my phone to see the conditions for the day. On that day it was going to be partly cloudy with a 60% chance of rain. Okay, maybe now we'll see what there is to be afraid of. Just like the app said, it started to rain about 4 p.m. It didn't last long, but that's how it all started. I was in my office and the rain started to fall. Almost as soon as it did, I started to hear music. Not today's music, but something classical. I didn't have a radio up there, and I'm in the middle of a field, so it couldn't be a car. I started to get concerned. Where was it coming from? I walked down the spiral staircase to my room, still hearing it playing. I walked into the hallway into the room across from mine. As soon as I put my hand on the doorknob, it stopped. And so did the rain. That was weird, I thought to myself. Must have been my imagination. Could have been the rain hitting the gutters, somehow making the acoustic sounds of the music in the house. There had to be a reason. After a while, I stopped thinking about it and went on with my night. A few days later, I ran into Mr. B at the hardware store. I told him about what had happened. He didn't seem surprised, and he just said, "I tried to tell you," and left. The day that changed my life forever happened about 2 weeks later. I was at work. I had taken an assistant manager position at a local department store. The pay wasn't as good as my previous job, but it wasn't as stressful. During one of my shifts, this guy came up to me out of nowhere and asked, "You own the old Bennett place out on Dead Man's Lane, don't you?" I was reluctant to answer, but eventually I said, Yes, I do." He was a big guy, biker type, 50-ish with long grey hair and tattoos. He said, "You're braver than I am. I wouldn't go near that place. Hope you found Jesus, 'cause you're gonna need him." The ride home that day I was unsettled. Everything that had been happening was starting to get to me. I was nervous to go home. After what this guy had said to me, what Mr. B had said, and the music thing, plus the weird basement, I was on edge so much that when I walked through the door, instead of placing my keys on the shelf by the door, I tossed them, hitting a small ceramic ballerina ornament off the shelf, breaking it. "Oh shit," I said loudly. "Something has not only been moved, but broken." There was no way to put it back. Then I heard it. A slow growling sound like a wild animal coming from the basement door, then the kitchen, then upstairs. It was coming from everywhere. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my head and fell to my knees, falling over into the fetal position. I started screaming, "Stop! Stop! I'm sorry! Please stop!" It didn't stop. It got louder and louder. From the floor I could see the basement door suddenly open, then slam shut. All the doors were doing it now, except the front door that remained closed for some reason. I felt a very cold breeze go through my body. Every light in the house was turned on and off repeatedly. I managed to get to my feet and I ran down the hallway toward the kitchen. The main floor bathroom door flung open, hitting me hard and knocking me backwards down the hallway. I lost my footing and fell to the floor. I must have hit my head because the next thing I remember was waking up on the floor, hearing the sound of my doorbell buzzing over and over again. All was silent and calm except for the buzzing. The buzzing soon turned to loud pounding upon the front door. I pulled myself together and stood up to answer the door, when I heard, Nick, I know you're in there. Nicholas, answer the damn door." I opened the door quickly only to see Mr. B standing there, shaking, sweating, and not the composed man I knew. "There's a really bad storm coming. We've got to get out of here. I can't, with all good conscience, let you stay here alone. We've got to go now." The storm clouds moved in fast, at a speed I've never seen before. Thunder started to roar. I tried to explain to Mr. B that I had broken something. In his panicked state he said, "That's the least of your worries. Let's go." The rain started falling hard. Lightning was crashing as the thunder roared on. That music started playing again, only this time Mr. B heard it as well. Then what happens next seems like something out of a bad horror movie. The house seems to suck Mr. B into it, nearly knocking me down in the process and sliding him fast across the floor and slamming him into a table that laid against the adjacent wall. The leg of the table broke, forcing it to crash to the floor. Another thing broken. The front door slammed with a force so hard that it broke the front door, 2 windows, completely out, allowing the rain to pour into the house. I quickly ran over to make sure Mr. B was okay. Son of a bitch, it's too late. We're never getting out of here now, Mr. B said angrily. The growling started again, only this time it seemed it was right in front of us. I felt a real bad burning on my left arm. Lifting my sleeve to see what it was, I saw 3 scratch marks with blood dripping from the third. Mr. B grabbed hold of his neck after lifting his hand. I noticed the same 3 scratches, only this time all of them were bleeding. Bleeding bad. The house is coming alive, he screamed. Upstairs, we must get upstairs. A lightning bolt hit the electric pole outside, causing the house to go black. We were now in total darkness and hearing that music, that growling, and both of us bleeding. I quickly pulled out my phone to turn on the light so we could at least see by that. Mr. B's phone had broken in the crash. I turned on my light only to notice the cellar door slowly opening by itself, the growling getting louder, and what appeared to be a black mass of goo pouring from the basement door and heading fast in our direction. I screamed, "Look out!" and grabbed Mr. B by the arm, pulling him out of the way, barely escaping the goo. We ran frantically up the stairs. What should have been 20 to 25 steps seemed more like 30 or 40. "This house is alive," Mr. B yelled. Finally reaching the top, I shined the light down the hallway of the doors that was the second floor. The hallway seemed to be longer than I remembered, with extra doors that I didn't have before. The walls were expanding and contracting like the house was breathing. There was a red substance resembling blood, and it could have been for all I know. It was oozing from the ceiling and down the walls. My bedroom was at the end of the hallway. Mr. B and I made a run for the last door on the left, my bedroom. We ran, and just as the red goo was about to hit the floor, I arrived at my bedroom door, grabbing the knob and opening it quickly, looking back, hoping to see Mr. B right behind me. But unfortunately, he wasn't. Shining my light down the hallway, I could see that he was about a quarter of the way from the door, running as fast as he could, but getting nowhere. It was like he was running on a treadmill. The red substance oozed down from the floor and quickly made a beeline straight for Mr. B. I screamed, "Give me your hand!" I stretched my hand out as far as I could. Mr. B extended his, but it was too late. The red substance had reached his shoe, and Mr. B screamed in agony as the substance began to burn him. The smell of burning flesh filled the hallway. As more of the substance reached him, Mr. B ignited into flames. I can still hear his screams. It lasted for a few seconds, and then it was gone, and so was my friend, Mr. B. I quickly ran into my room. From out of my bedroom window I could see what appeared to be flames. When the lightning hit the pole, it must have caused the transformer to catch fire, igniting the house as well. The outside of the house was burning, but not the inside, and the rain wasn't putting it out. What the hell is this place? Shining my light back into the room, I could see shadows in the shape of people appearing in the walls. Some short, some tall. Then the voices started. A woman saying, "I'm so cold." Then a little girl, "Mommy!" And an old man, "Help me!" I quickly ran up to my office, the only place I had left to go. From out of the window I could see the rain pouring down and lightning bolts lighting up the skies. The voices continued, and down below I could see that the rain had fallen so hard and fast that it had washed away all the dirt from the field, exposing skeletal remains all around the house. Then it hit me. Oh my God. This was not a house. It was an old funeral home built on burial grounds. They must have removed the headstones and left the bodies. That would explain everything. In shock, I stepped backwards, my back hitting the wall. Then I slid down into a sitting position. My phone had fallen to the floor. The light just so happened to be shining on the doorway to the room. I mumbled to myself, I didn't know. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see a black mass in the shape of a person crawling through the doorway towards me. Shrieking a horrible sound, it reached its hand out, as if to choke me. Totally exhausted, I put my hands over my eyes and screamed as the shadow engulfed the room. Somebody, somewhere, must have seen the flames and called the fire department. From speaking with my landlord and police officials, I gathered that when they found me, I was in the basement, laying on one of the tables, mumbling to myself. I don't remember any of that. Mr. B's body was never recovered. From what I've heard, the house is still standing with only minor fire damage. I don't see how that's possible. But now knowing what I know about that place, I kind of believe it. I had told this story to the police and some guy dressed like Judge Judy, and they all looked at me like I was crazy. I am not crazy. I like my new apartment. It's kind of a small studio-style apartment. I've got a bed and a dresser, a nightstand and a lamp. Best of all, the rent is free. I don't have to work anymore. My neighbours are nice and a little quirky if you ask me, but nice nonetheless. There's a TV that we share in the living room, a game room where we gather and play cards and ping pong and other games of that sort. I have my own bathroom, which is nice. Food is included. It's mostly just mush, but it's still food. Security here is tight. There are cameras everywhere and there are rules. If you break those rules, the landlord will move you to a much smaller apartment with no windows, but gives you this very cool jacket to wear that lets you hug yourself. I like that jacket. There are a bunch of nice ladies that come by every day, giving us little white pieces of candy. Sometimes they're different colours, but mostly white. Sometimes they even come at night. Oh, I gotta go now. It's bedtime. I'm excited. Tomorrow we go outside. Good night.
When my friends and I were in junior high, we were bored and got the bright idea to go dung ditching. That's where you ring the doorbell and run off to hide in the bushes and watch people's reactions. Our neighborhood was separated from another subdivision by a field, so we walked through the field to begin our quest. It was in December, but there wasn't any snow and it wasn't too cold. It was also dark outside, but it was only around 8 or 9 o'clock. So we got to our first house. There's a car there and some lights, so we know someone is home. My friends and I walk to the front door and ring the bell, and start dashing back to stand behind the tall shrubs and see what happens. For a minute nothing did. Then we saw the door open slowly, and saw an old woman hobble out. "Hello? Who's there?" she called. "Hello?" She called again, sounding scared. My friends and I were horrified. We didn't expect this, and guilt was pouring over me at how scared this lonely old woman sounded. So after a split second of indecision, I yanked my friends from behind the shrubs and called, "Oh my gosh, sorry, we thought no one was home. We are doing Christmas carols." One of my buddies was wearing a stupid Santa hat, so we kind of fit the bill. My friends looked at me like I was crazy, but went along with it. The old lady was super excited to have some visitors, and we sang about 5 of her favorite Christmas songs. We were completely off-key, kept messing up the lyrics, and obviously sucked, but she urged us to do more of her favorites. We even started getting into it, and added little dance moves, cracking up on how ridiculous this was. She ended up inviting us in and gave us cookies and hot chocolate and let us play with her little dog. We walked back to our neighborhood feeling like idiot failures, when my dumbass friend got the bright idea to ding-dong ditch his own house since he knew his dad was home. He rang the bell, ran back behind the shrubs with us. His dad ran out with frazzled hair and wearing tighty-whities, holding a shotgun. He chased after us and we ran, terrified. He went and got his truck so he could patrol the neighborhood, having no idea it was his own dumbass son he was hunting. And we ended up freezing as we hid in a big clump of bushes for about an hour. Needless to say, we never ding-dong ditched anyone again.
Santa's big sack of toys. It was so big. And it would only grow bigger. Every year he goes from house to house with a massive sack on his back. He would travel all around the world in a single night, and he would give toys out to all the boys and girls. There are no reindeer or a sleigh to help him. That is a myth. The children don't understand the work it took to give them all of these toys. Why do you think Santa does this for all the children of the world? Do you know why he does this? Perhaps he is a kind soul and incredibly generous. He drags the heavy sack from house to house as he does all of his deliveries, groaning under the weight of his eternal servitude to ensure all the children of the world receive a gift. Unfortunately for him, the birth rate continues to rise. He huffs and he puffs as he tries to gain entry to every home to deliver the gift. Santa receives a token for every child he manages to deliver to on that single night. With enough tokens, he will gain his freedom. Now, again, why does he do this? A penance for crimes he committed long ago. The offer of an unachievable forgiveness hanging over his head for a crime now long forgotten. He knows he will never finish this quest, and every year he becomes more angry at the parents and more resentful to the children he gives gifts to. Every year he breaks his back. And for what? And this year, he has decided to start taking heads instead of tokens. Will he take yours?
A 15-year-old girl named Donna had lived with her father in a small house in the suburbs. Ever since her mother died, Donna had depended on her father for everything. They had a wonderful relationship and loved each other very much. One morning, Donna's father was leaving on a business trip. As they ate breakfast together, he told her that he would be home very late that night. With that, he kissed her on the forehead, grabbed his briefcase, and walked out the front door. Later that day, when Donna came home from school, she did some homework and watched some TV. By midnight, her father still had not returned, so she decided to go to bed. That night, she had a crazy dream. She found herself standing at the edge of a busy highway. Cars and trucks whizzed by at an alarming rate. She looked across the highway and saw a familiar figure standing on the other side. It was her father. His hands were cupped around his mouth and he seemed to be shouting something to her, but she couldn't make out what he was saying. As the traffic whizzed by, she strained to hear. Her father's eyes were sad. He seemed to be desperately trying to communicate something to her. She could barely make out the words. Don't open door. Suddenly, Donna was awoken from the dream by a strange tapping noise. Tap, tap, tap. Then someone began to ring the doorbell downstairs. Ring, ring, ring. She scrambled out of bed and put on her slippers. Then, dressed only in her nightgown, she ran downstairs and went to the front door. Looking through the peephole, she saw her father's face outside. He was staring right at her, but the doorbell kept ringing incessantly. "Okay, hold on, I'm coming," she shouted. She pulled back the deadbolt and was about to unlatch the door when she stopped. She looked through the peephole at her father again. Something about his expression didn't look quite right. His eyes were wide open, and he looked terrified. She slid the deadbolt back in place. "Dad," she yelled through the door, "did you forget your keys?" Ring, ring, ring. "Dad, answer me." Ring, ring, ring. "Dad, please, I need you to answer me." Ring, ring, ring. "Is there someone else out there with you?" Ring, ring, ring. "Why won't you answer me?" Ring, ring, ring. "I'm not opening the door until you say something." The doorbell kept ringing and ringing, but for some reason her father refused to answer her desperate cries. For the rest of the night, the frightened girl cowered in the corner of the hallway, helplessly listening to the ceaseless ringing of the doorbell. It seemed to go on for hours and hours. Eventually, she fell into an uneasy sleep. At dawn, she woke up and realized that everything was quiet. She crept over to the door and looked through the peephole again. Her father was still there, staring at her. She cautiously opened the door and was confronted with a sight that filled her with unimaginable horror. Her father's severed head was hanging from a nail above the door. There was a note attached to the doorbell. In a crude, scrawled handwriting, it read, "Clever girl."
Who loves eggnog? I know I do. I make mine very specifically. It's the same as most recipes, minus my special ingredient. I usually hand it out to carolers during their nightly shows around town. I'm always one to help spread the holiday cheer. Last night, I made a batch for the local school choir team, as they have a program where they go to the care homes in town to sing for the elderly. Special ingredients, you ask? Arsenic. Only the best for these jolly folks.
One time, around 10 years ago, my girlfriend had to go back to her hometown due to some family reason. Anyways, I was sitting in the dining room finishing some takeout pizza. My dog was sitting beside me, nothing unusual. But then, I heard as if the stairboard creaked a little bit. It always did when I stepped on it. I called out, "Is anyone there?" and waited. I was waiting for about 3 minutes, and then after no answer was given, I went to look for myself. I found nobody on the staircase or on the second story. So, I went back and finished my pizza. After I was done, I read my book and began watching a movie on Netflix. When I paused the movie to get myself some Coke, I was sure I heard the floor creak upstairs. So, instead of calling out, I went up there and looked for myself. Again, it was totally empty. Deserted, you could say. Eventually, I decided to call it a night. I turned the TV off and locked the doors. I had 2 of them, one at the front of the house and another one leading to the backyard. I was peacefully washing up to go to bed when my dog started barking at me in a very aggressive sort of way. I just maybe thought I smelled like pizza or something. My dog was sort of touchy when it came to food. I gave my dog a few treats to calm her down. After that, it was all quiet. I started dozing off at around 2:45 a.m. I slept for only about an hour before I woke up with the light through the window shining on me. I'm usually very sensitive when it comes to those things. I have no idea why. Before closing the drapes around the window, I stared through it for a couple minutes. I kept thinking about how this must have been the most beautiful night I've seen in many years. And just then, I felt a breath of air on my body. I didn't expect anything strange, just my dog coming to say hello. I quickly turned around, and I didn't see my dog. I saw the creepiest clown I have ever seen in my life. I screamed and picked up my pen, which was the only thing nearby that I can use as a weapon. When the clown started laughing in this eerie and human laugh, I was really dripping sweat. I had no idea how he got into my house. All the doors were locked, and the windows were too small for a person to get through. My dog, she wasn't reacting to this at all. I found that really strange, because she usually barked at just about everyone who walked by her house, let alone come inside. I called my dog, no answer. I called again, and no answer. Now, I was freaking out. There was a creepy clown in my house that was definitely not a human being. The last thing I could remember is the clown touching me with his cold, pale hands. I fell back and only woke up in the morning. The first thing I did was go check all the doors. They were all locked. They were only able to lock from the inside too. My dog was still out on her bed, which was really weird. She was usually up super early in the morning. It was 9 a.m. now, and I took her to the vet. The vet took some blood samples on my still unconscious dog and said that she was given a really strong hypnotic drug, a drug that made someone or something really sleepy. So things were making a little more sense now. The clown somehow broke into my house and injected some drug into my dog to make her unconscious. Once I left, I called my girlfriend as soon as I got home. I told her everything. The next call I made was 911. I called the cops and told them what happened as well. They just told me they will send a couple of officers to inspect the area as soon as possible. I was just really depressed now. I was waiting for the cops to show up, and as soon as they did, they inspected the house everywhere, inside and out. When they checked the house, they couldn't find any signs of a break-in. But when they inspected the roof, they told me some creepy news. There was a hatch in my roof that I never bothered to check when I was buying the house. This led to the far corners of the attic, sort of like a ventilation shaft or something like that. Nothing special, right? Well, they found the hatch glass broken, just big enough for a person to squeeze through. Then in the attic, which I also never checked out, was a cut-up mattress with some cigarettes, candy wrappers, milk cartons, and a few burned-up candles. It turns out that clown has been living in my attic for God knows how many years, and that night he just decided to show himself. After the cops left, my phone started getting some notifications about every 5 seconds or so. This continued for about 15 to 20 minutes. I had about 200 something notifications. They were all from my Twitter account, and they all read the same thing.
I will get you.
With a picture of the same clown that I saw in my bedroom. His account address was blank. There was no way I could report him or anything. I ended up deleting all my social media accounts and buying a new phone altogether. When my girlfriend came back, we sold our house and moved states. We are now a married couple and have 3 children, and this never happened again. I really hope this doesn't, and I hope none of you ever experience anything like this in your lives.
Okay, this happened to me last year. Keep in mind, this is told in the perspective of a female. I started school at a local community college. I was looking to make new friends since I never really had the opportunity before. I was a weird fat kid throughout elementary and high school. College was a chance for me to reinvent myself, to actually make friends and fit in for once. It's college. No one gives a fuck if you're weird. You're all just trying to get through finals, after all. Well, I had class with this one kid. Let's call him Creep, because that's what he was. Anyway, me and the Creep had our ITE class together. I'd see him every day, but didn't talk to him much. He stayed in his corner of the room. I sat with my friend, and the older lady, we'll name Jay. I had a TARDIS backpack. Yeah, I know. It's not bigger on the inside, by the way. Anyway, he saw this and said it was cool. I said that was cool, and we talked a bit about our interests as we walked to our next class. He was into cosplay, as was I, and we both enjoyed BBC programs along with anime. He seemed friendly, and I went about my day. Things got uncomfortable after that. He started showing up everywhere that I did. Mostly he would invite himself to lunch with me and my friend S. He was disgusting. We went to lunch one day, and he ordered this burger with peppers, onions, and mayo. Mayo is the bane of my existence, mind you. He didn't use napkins. The thing smelled terrible, and he wiped it on his already stained pants. It wasn't pleasant to say the least. He kept popping up places and inviting himself to lunch, and I was beyond done with him. I have a habit of attracting weird people. I don't know why. I was just ready to cut and run if it came to it. Anyway, he invited himself to lunch with me again when S wasn't present. He said he had a crush on S, and I knew S went through a bad breakup. I told him to leave her alone, but he was insistent on me seeing if she liked him. I said no, leave her alone. He left after that, and I enjoyed my shitty spaghetti. Then the freaky thing happened. I was leaving to go to my car one day when I ran into him. We talked a bit, but I was trying to get away from him, but he really insisted on talking. Eventually, I tried to excuse myself, saying that I was going to go to my car and I would talk to him later. He followed me. He said it was fine and walked with me towards my car. He then proceeded to tell me a funny story about him getting drunk and punching his crazy ex in the face. Like that would totally impress me or some shit. I did what any normal person would. I looked him in the eye and said, no. Got in my car and drove off. He fucked off and left me alone after that. That wasn't the really creepy part though. No. I learned a few weeks ago, he killed someone before. Apparently, he got into a fight and stabbed someone in self-defense. The circumstances were more than shady though, but the police in my area are pretty shitty. The guy the creep stabbed ended up dying. So yeah, I was stalked by someone who killed another person. Ain't I lucky?
I lay in my bed, restless and alone on a dark and silent night. I toss and turn in my bed, trying to find a comfortable spot, but I feel uneasy. Something about tonight just does not feel right. I toss and turn until I finally find a comfortable position. I close my eyes, but it doesn't make a difference. It's too dark in my room to see a thing anyways. I guess it takes time for my eyes to adjust to darkness. I lay there, still and silent on a dark and dank night. My body is relaxed, my mind is blank, and I'm ready for some much-needed rest. Instantly, the silence is shattered, and my mind fills with fearful thoughts as my startled eyes flash open. Knock, knock. It's undoubtedly this sound of fist on glass. But no, it couldn't be. What would someone's motivation be to wake someone alone in their room? Think logically. If someone wanted to break in, why would they want to warn me with a knock? They could just break in, make a loud noise, or try to be as silent as possible. Why would they knock? Monsters don't exist. I give myself some peace of mind and simply look out the window, but I'm facing the other way and I'm too timid to turn my head, afraid of finding my gray sphere standing outside my window. What could it be, though? Maybe a couple birds flew into my window? No, that's too unrealistic. Could a group of kids be running around late at night, knocking on windows to get a few laughs? It's a possibility. Come to think of it, maybe it was my imagination. Maybe I heard the usual creak in the house, and my paranoid mind has mistaken it for a knock. 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 Nope, that definitely was not my imagination. Those damn kids are persistent. They don't want to quit until they get that reaction. Maybe some sick, twisted freak is standing outside waiting for me to look so he can smash through and attack me. No, don't think that. Don't get paranoid. Besides, he's outside, I'm inside. Until I hear shatter, I know I'm safe. Monsters don't exist. Besides, I have not moved yet. Maybe those kids will think I'm a heavy sleeper and leave me alone. No, it can't be kids. No kid would wait around this long just to get a reaction from one lonely girl. They'd just get bored and move along. But what could it be? Why would a serial killer target me, of all people? Think logically. Monsters don't exist. Don't get paranoid. They're outside, I'm inside. Until I hear shatter, I know I'm safe. But if it's not a monster or some kind of killer, what could it be? Just pretend to be asleep and maybe they'll go away. Knock, knock. Oh God, I can't think of a noise I hate more than that persistent knock. Please go away! Just leave me alone and let me be! There's no hope. It's going to get in here and do sick and horrible things to me. Inhale. Take deep breaths. I can feel my heart pound on my chest. Just relax. Monsters don't exist. Remember, they're outside. I'm inside. Until I hear shatter, I know I'm safe. Repeat that. Don't let your fear get the best of you. Just pretend to be asleep. Don't move a muscle. Knock. Knock. They're outside. I'm inside. Until I hear shatter, I know I'm safe. Monsters don't exist. Just pretend to be asleep and pray it'll go away. Knock. Knock. They're outside. I'm inside. Until I hear shatter, I know I'm safe. Frightful tears begin to drip down my face. Monsters don't exist. Monsters do not exist. I began to whisper to myself. They're outside. I'm inside. Until I hear shatter, I know I'm safe. They're outside. I'm inside. Until I hear shatter, I know I'm safe. Knock. Knock. I can't take it anymore! I'm gonna go mad listening to those knocks. At least if I see what it is, I'll have peace of mind. Take a deep breath. I repeat to myself one more time. They're outside. I'm inside. Until I hear shatter, I know I'm safe. Take a few more deep breaths. My heart pounding as hard as it ever has pounded at a mile a minute. I slowly turn my head to face the window. My heart sinks into my chest and I'm too afraid to scream or move. I turn my head to find a pale figure, beady black eyes staring through me into my soul as a horrid grin creeps across his face. It was standing inside the whole time, knocking on my window. Knock, knock.
Creature's Christmas by Mia Mina. I watched the lights blinking out the window. I'd never seen such decorations. Truth be known, no one had. The whole town had been watching the house since the new people moved in. I wondered if anyone had talked to them. I looked to the clock on the wall. It was still before 8. The sun was barely down. I might be okay with heading out this early. You're not thinking that, are you? I turned to see my brother walking in the back door. He tossed his black hair off his face as he scowled at me. I turned back to the window as I said, I'm just curious about them. Why would they put up all those colorful lights which blink and all? I just want to understand. We shouldn't have allowed their type to move here. They have no place here. I thought about his words. I didn't know exactly what he meant. Oh, I knew they were different. The fact that they were whispered about was enough to tell anyone that, but I couldn't see why we should be rude to them. You're too young to remember the last time their type was allowed to live among us, Anton said as he came to put his hand on my shoulder. There were so many who died. It was horrible. One group became 2, 2 became 10. Soon we were overrun with them. They ran us out of our homes and our lands. Nothing good will come of this. He was much older than me. His free hand moved through my dark red hair as I tilted my head towards him, saying, It couldn't have really been that bad. Maybe they just need to be talked to. Did anyone bother explaining to them about where they were moving? Danica, I've told you. It isn't safe to discuss things with them openly. They aren't able to understand the differences, he said softly. I could almost see his electric blue eyes in the lights from the window. You're too young to understand. You will. Just do us all a favor. Don't do what you're still thinking about doing. Anton Petrovin, you need to get out of my head. You know it's rather rude. After all, it's not like I'm a child anymore, I said, more than a bit upset at him being in my mind. When you start thinking responsibly, I might, he said with a bit of chuckle in his voice. I knew he meant well. Besides, it's too early to be visiting anyone. We have family plans tonight. Internally, I groaned. Don't get me wrong. I love my family. But spending another dull evening talking about how things were so much better in the old days, before we moved here. They moved here. I was born here. I don't remember the old country. I only know the stories. It seemed to me they spent so much time in the past they forgot about the present. He chuckled before he said, "One day I'll take you to the old country. Then you will understand why it is so important for us all to remember where we came from." "I'm from here," I said, blurting out the words without thinking. He laughed at my indignation. I knew he had expected my other complaint, that I'm too young for any of the important things. I don't know why, but I felt different. I needed to say something different. However, it kept his mind off other things on my mind. I still wanted to meet the new family, to see if they could possibly understand us. Perhaps they could live peacefully among us. By now, Anton was pulling me from the window to get my coat and leave. He was anxious not to be late. I went with him. We were actually early. There was rarely a time we were late. Anton just didn't like being late, ever. I teased him about it once, but the hurt look he gave me ensured I never teased him again about it. One day I intended to ask him about it, but I could wait on that. Mom pulled me into the kitchen to finish getting drinks ready for everyone. The meal was already prepared on the table and ready for consumption. All that remained was the drinks. Mom talked about the new additions to the family this year that would be joining us for their first Christmas celebrations. The new moon gave us time to gather and feast before the full moon celebration of the ending of the year and the beginning of the new one. We always had festivals which would take as much as a month this time of year. This was not just Christmas celebration, but it also was the changing of the year. It would include the joining of couples together for mating. These couples would have waited since the last of these gatherings to be blessed by the family elders to be joined and officially recognized as a mated couple. I had not gotten to that point where I would be involved in this part of the celebration. However, Mom was grilling me the whole time we worked on drinks for everyone. She wanted to know if I had met anyone to feel close to, anyone special. As an unmarried daughter of my age, I was still seen as a child. I still spent my weekends with my parents. Mom knew I hadn't met anyone in the last 3 days, but she still enjoyed acting like she didn't. She made the comment that I needed to get out more and spend more time socializing. As I set 2 glasses of sparkling juice on the children's table, I looked at Anton, rolling my eyes. He chuckled as he continued his own discussion with Dad. Mom had missed my look to Anton as she put 2 glasses of wine on the table for the adults. Dad was the oldest member of the family. All the family looked to him for direction. No one would dare roll their eyes at something he said, not even me. I looked to my father. He had been grooming Anton for longer than I'd been alive. He was very easily the strongest of my brothers. None of my sister's mates could stand against him. He was clearly the best choice for taking the head of the family when Dad died. I knew they were talking about the wrestling matches the men would get into 5 days from now. It was tradition. It was practice for what would happen in the future when Dad would die. Frankly, no one really wanted Dad to die. Still, none of us lived forever. Our lives were longer, not immortal. I knew it was wrong, but this was why I was not happy about us being so early. I wanted to hide in the mass of family, which would be joining us. I wanted to be lost in the mass of bodies so I wouldn't be the focus of Mom's mothering. She would have the grandchildren, the mated daughters, and the daughter-in-laws, and all the unmated daughters to fawn and mother over. There would be so much noise taking over the house the next 4 weeks, we would all be happy for silence when we returned to our homes. I was one of the lucky ones that wouldn't have any family visitors in my home, mostly because my place didn't have the room. Unlike most of my siblings and their families, I didn't have a large enough place to house other people. It hadn't been my intention to get a place too small for guests, but it seemed I had. We finished putting drinks on the table. I looked at the 2 tables counting chairs. They weren't actually 2 tables, more like 2 groups of tables. One for the adults and one for the children. The children were separated by age and gender. It was mostly to keep down arguments between the kids. The children knew better than to cause trouble, but sometimes teasing between them would go too far. I hated sitting at the children's tables, but my age and unmated status kept me there. Mom came up behind me and leaned on my shoulder. "One day soon you won't be," she said, knowing instinctively what I was feeling. I turned and looked at her and said, "Mom, I'm not in any hurry to get mated." "I know, sweetie. There'll come a time when you will not be seated with the children. I hope you know it's only a technicality at this time," Mom said, patting my hair softly. We all know you're more than capable of taking care of yourself. I looked around the room to see if Anton was near before I spoke. Mom, don't you think someone should talk to the new people in town to explain things? Or at least see if they can handle what they've moved into? Danica, your father did have a discussion with them the day they moved in. There's no need for you to get involved or worry. Besides, I'm not sure they will be with us for long, Mom said, turning me around so she could look at me directly. There was something in her eyes which made me wonder what was really going on. I didn't have time to wonder. The door opened as the influx of family members started. Once this began, I was greeting each, taking coats, putting them in the coat closet. I didn't wait to be ordered. It was easy to hide from the inevitable conversations I didn't want to have anything to do with while doing this task. The evening went well, as most family gatherings usually do. While we had very few family from out of town on the first night of these gatherings, the second night was always the busiest. This night was no different than any other second night. When they started putting down the youngest children, I moved to slip out the door. Anton appeared behind me to put a hand on my shoulder, saying, "Need company?" "Not really," I said, turning to look at him. "Oh, I'm hurt." "But you're coming anyway." "Of course," he said with a non-repentant smile. I just shook my head as we headed out into the night. I didn't stay up that night. I still had to work the next day. It made sense for me to sleep as much as I could. The problem was I woke before I wanted to be up. I wasn't sure what woke me, but there it was a second time. My doorbell. I got up and put on my jeans. It didn't take me long to get to the door. I looked through the peephole to see who was there. The guy standing there was not known to me. This was strange because I literally knew everyone in town. I left the chain on as I opened up the door while saying, "Hello?" "Hi," he said, his eyes meeting mine. They were unbelievably green. There was something off on him. "I'm sorry to disturb you. I just moved in down the street. You seem to be the only one home. I was wondering if you had some eggs we could borrow?" I tilted my head as I smiled. This was an unexpected opportunity. I couldn't pass this up. "I do believe I have some. How many do you need?" I said as I moved around the door to remove the chain and let him in. I know it's not the smartest thing to let an unknown guy into your home, but I really didn't think he was dangerous. Opening the door the rest of the way, I let him in and closed the door behind him. As I led him to the kitchen, he said, "We'll need about 6 if that's okay." "I think they'll be okay. I'm not going to be using all I have. I would rather they not go bad while I'm dealing with family activities." "Holiday activities?" he said, as I realized my mistake. At least I hadn't said more. I opened the refrigerator to pull out the egg carton as I spoke. "Kind of. We don't really do holidays that much. I can tell, actually," he said, taking the eggs from my hand. "Does everyone in this town hate Christmas?" I didn't know how to answer that. It wasn't that we hated Christmas or even holidays. We just kept celebrations without decorations. It was more a family affair than an event for commercial sales. There were other reasons behind it as well. I couldn't actually speak of those things, but looking at him, I wished I could. "No," I said, looking back up into those impossibly green eyes. "We just don't do that much decorating for it. It's more of a family event than an event shared with the world. I don't see much of anyone doing anything other than us. I actually asked Mom and Dad if they wanted to put things up, considering nobody else was," he said with a light chuckle. His chuckle was a bit musical. I liked the sound of it. I grinned before it dawned on me that I didn't introduce myself. I must have blushed, because I felt my face go warm as I said, "I'm sorry, I'm Danica Petrovin. Welcome to Gaviline." He chuckled, making the warmth of my face increase before he said, "I'm Nikolai Nitch. My foster family and I moved in 3 houses down from yours about a week ago." I grinned at him, almost giggling. "They're your foster family," I said, curious at how that worked. He looked to be my age, or maybe a year or 2 older. Then I was a mature 17. My parents were encouraging me to move out on my own shortly after I turned 16 because of my maturity. Anton keeping an eye on me was part of the deal when I moved out. "Yeah," he said, almost like he didn't want to bring too much of it up at the time with the girl he'd just met. "Legally, I could have moved out 2 years ago. They have 2 younger children who have severe disabilities, so I stay to help. I finished high school, and I've been working on some college courses through the internet." I smiled, suddenly feeling silly, standing there in the kitchen with him standing there holding the egg carton with the refrigerator door open. I decided I needed to close the door to the refrigerator. I glanced at the eggs between us as I said, I've been taking classes online as well as working. Oh, where do you work? I have a job at my sister's scent shop on Main, I said, grinning slightly. I'll have to come by, Nikolai said, grinning back at me. There was an awkward silence that took over the kitchen between us. We just stood there looking at each other before we both looked at the eggs. He said, I should get these back to Mom. She'll be needing them soon. I nodded and said, okay. Are you working today? He said as we made our way back to the door. I could come by and maybe get something for my mom and sister? Sure. Do they have any scents they like in particular? Mom likes daisies, he said as we reached the door. Zora likes carnations and lilies. I nodded instantly, starting to think of things to show him in the shop. We reached the door as I said, I can help you come up with something for them. I'd really appreciate it, he said, smiling. He looked down at the eggs and continued, well, thanks again for the eggs. I'll let Mom know we owe you. Oh, don't worry about them. I'd rather have them used than sit here and go bad. I wanted to say more, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I'll see you at the store this afternoon. Yes, he said, smiling again. I closed the door behind him. I looked out the peephole to watch him walking away. There was something about him I wanted to know more. Still, I had to get ready for work. That's what I went to do once he was out of sight. Christmas Eve was always a busy day. Even though there were no decorations in town or anyone's houses, the giving of gifts and gathering of family and friends was still very much a tradition. We always had those shoppers who had to pick up a last-minute gift for a family member or a friend that they couldn't find anything for or didn't expect to see. When he did show up, I'd already picked out several scents which fit what he had told me that morning. I had told my sister some about him. She said I could help him when he came in. I noticed it then as I helped him with the items. In a shop full of scents, no one scent actually stands out too much. However, there was a scent on his clothing which was not on him per se. It was one I was not truly familiar with. He ended up picking out a perfume for his mom and several candles and lotion for his sister. As I was checking him out, Katya came up to us saying, You're new in town, from what Danica says. Yes, my family moved in about a week ago down the street from Danica, he said, answering her. I noticed a look in Katya's eyes, which meant her mind was working quickly on something. I kept working on his checkout as she said, Your family is large? Well, kind of, he said with a chuckle that made my head lose focus for a moment. We're a mixed family. Mom and Dad have 3 children of their own, all under the age of 8, 2 of which are severely disabled. They have 6 foster children. There are 4 between 10 and 16. Zora is 17 and I'm 19. How many of the Fosters are related? Katya said as she moved between us to finish wrapping the candles. Oh, none of us are, he said, looking at her, then me. I shrugged as he continued. My parents died when I was 5. I was placed with Mom and Dad at 10. There were several other Fosters before that. That's where I met Zora. She was in my home before Mom and Dad. She showed up 2 years after I was moved to them. Do you remember your parents? I looked at her with a stop with the personal questions look. However, Nikolai didn't seem to mind as he kept answering, saying, Barely. I remember faces and voices, but I don't remember much more. I was finishing up the sale when Katya said, Why don't you come over to our family's dinner tonight? I was glad I wasn't looking at either of them or holding anything in my hands. I forced myself to keep from looking at her incredulously. I was even more surprised when he said, Would that be okay? Sure, Mom and Dad always have room for more. Plus it would give Danica someone to talk to. I've not seen her talk to anyone as much as she has talked to you, she said as I felt my cheeks flame up. She was so getting it when he was out of the store. So, what time? Be at Danica's around 7. Our brother Anton will be there to pick both of you up. Anton will want to meet you too, before you come over. Just the way he is. They talked as if I wasn't there while she walked him to the door. I watched him leave and walk out of sight as she came back to me. Well, you didn't tell me you liked him that much, she said. What are you talking about? You were talking to him like you were asking him out on a date for me. What was that about me talking to him more than anyone else? I said in a loud whisper. Well, it's true. Oh, wait, you talked to Anton more than you talked to the rest of us. I scowled at her as I moved back to the stock I'd been putting up before Nikolai came in. I started stacking it on the shelf, knowing no matter what I said at this point, it would be useless. She was already on the phone with Anton, letting him know when he picked me up there would be another with me. However, there was something she said I couldn't hear. This bothered me. She came up to me later when I had cooled off a bit. I looked at her as she said, "Did you notice the smell on his clothing, which wasn't really on him? He smelled like everyone else I'd always known, but the scent on his clothing was different." I looked at her as she knew I understood, but I said it anyway. "Yes, I did. That was his family," she said, moving the box out of the way, "which is why I invited him tonight. We all know what happens at midnight. He doesn't have to be lost anymore, though. I understand Dad's decision to let them move here now." I sighed. I had hoped there was a way for the new family to avoid it. "Can't we tell them to take down the decorations? All of it? We could help them take them down, right?" "It doesn't work that way, Danica. You know it," she said, somewhat condescending. "Besides, we've no control over it. It's been hundreds of years since we've dealt with this. I know you don't have any memory of it, but trust us, okay?" "I don't really have a choice, do I?" I said, finishing the box. She shrugged slightly. When we both went back to work for the next hour, we always closed early pre-holidays. It was safer for us to get home and where we needed to be before the night was really settled in. I got home before 4. I had time to pack my bag for the night and the next few days. I knew my brothers would take care of Nikolai. By the time Anton and Nikolai showed up, I was changed and ready to go. Anton gave me a mental tease at the clothing, though he knew it was for the occasion. Nikolai came in slacks and a button-down shirt. I could almost guess my sister told him how to dress appropriately. The trip to my parents was mostly filled with Anton and Nikolai talking as if they were long-lost friends. I actually felt like I was sitting in on a reunion as an outsider. When we got to my parents, it was more the same. Mom and Dad acted like they had a new son in their midst. I was able to slip into the background. I watched how easy he was with them. It was like he'd always been part of our family. I noticed he was more comfortable than when he had been talking about his family, foster family. If I really thought about it, I liked watching him move. I liked watching him, period. I tilted my head just as a hand touched my shoulder. "He's a very impressive young man," Mom said close to my ear. I almost jumped from her words. "I don't know him that well, but I think so too." "You should get to know him better," Mom said as we watched him working with Dad and Anton to finish the preparations for the night. "I'm sitting the two of you with the adults tonight. I think it's appropriate." I was stunned. I knew what she was saying, but I wasn't willing to believe it. There was no way he was one of us, right? Or did she mean... I shook my head as the door opened. My duties as greeter started. I hugged everyone as they came in, took their coats and wraps, and put them in the closet, and I took whatever gifts they had to the gift room. This had been my assignment for these family gatherings since I reached my teens. I knew every family member's name as well as their extended family. Halfway through the evening, I was pulled away from the door. One of my sister's children took my place, as my mother pulled me into the other room and placed me near Nikolai, who was surrounded by my brothers and sisters' mates, talking. I shyly smiled at him. It was great to see how they had just accepted him as part of the family. Midnight meal was always pleasant. Mom had outdone herself again. The time of silence came. We were all quiet as the 30 minutes passed. Nikolai looked at me questioning, but stayed quiet with the rest of us. I didn't want to answer the question he was asking silently. Lights were spinning around the house, blinking through the window. As a child, they filled me with wonder. However, with the knowledge of what they meant, I had an involuntary shiver. Nikolai touched my hand under the table when I shivered. For a moment, all I felt was his hand. It was almost like someone electrified me. I looked at him to meet those impossibly green eyes under his light brown bangs. I forgot the lights and the sounds of the striking against the walls. I snapped out of it as the door was banged repeatedly. There was shrieking in the streets as the lights died. I forced a grin to Nikolai, who had no idea what was happening. I couldn't break the silence to tell him. Again came the howling and the shrieking, which got louder and louder as it moved closer to the house. We all slowed our breathing to make it as silent as it could be. I looked at Nikolai, silently having him breathe with me. The question was in his eyes still as to what was happening. I hated he had to learn like this, but knew there was much he was going to learn that night besides. I knew he could see the mixed emotions in my eyes. Just then there were thunder crashing sounds around the house as if lightning was striking 2 points on each side around the house. There was the chance that some of the children would start crying. One of my sisters moved to be with the littlest children. There was a deafening quiet after the thunder and lightning. No one moved. We barely breathed. This was the breaking time. It was the last 10 minutes of the silent time. The silence was worse than the howling and the shrieking. Looking out the window, I was able to see the trees bending in the wind. We all knew it was only 5 minutes long, but they were the longest 5 minutes of this half hour. At the end of the 5 minutes of silence, there was a scratching at the door, followed by scraping along the bricks on the outside of the house. I always thought it sounded like someone scraping nails across a chalkboard, or the scraping of styrofoam. The involuntary shiver ran up my spine when it started. Nikolai squeezed my hand to comfort me. It was nice to have his support, even though I had gone through this my whole life alone. The sound got louder as it progressed around the house. Then there was the sound of footsteps on the roof. They seemed more emphatic this time than they had been in past times. Katya was leaning on Jarek, who had his arms around her across from us. They were to be mated at this gathering. I smiled slightly at them before looking up at Nikolai. Those impossible green eyes were watching me closer than any I had ever seen. He could tell I was scared and nervous, but he didn't care. For whatever reason, he wanted to be here. Somehow I knew if it came into the house, he would try to defend me. Moving closer would make noise. That's what I wanted to do. However, I knew better. The footsteps on the house became banging. I heard a low growl from one end of the table and turned to see who had broke the silence. That's when I realized there was no one there. I was shocked. Who was missing? I started counting around the table while checking off names in my head. I made my way around the area silently, just looking around with my eyes. I had counted 20 of my siblings and their mates before I came to Gaza, sitting alone. I looked around and didn't see my brother, her mate, Andrek. Kaza looked like she was going to cry. Her right hand was over her mouth and her left hand was moving slowly over the slight baby bump. Where was Andrek? I wondered far too loudly in my head. There was a growl again, only I was sure it was from outside now. I looked out the window but couldn't see anything, even near the ground. Nikolai squeezed my hand, bringing my eyes back to him. It was almost like I could hear him asking what was wrong. I blinked at him. It wasn't possible he could ask me that mentally, was it? I mean, he wasn't one of us, or was he? Then there was a crash into the front door of the house. Everyone jumped, even though we all tried not to. There was more scraping on the door before the noises stopped utterly. We looked around at everyone before anyone said anything or moved. Dad was the first one up, followed by Mom and Anton. The men in the family moved forward behind them. The women mostly went to the children. Nikolai and I kind of drifted forwards towards the door with the men. He leaned down to whisper into my ear, saying, "When we can get a moment, I want to talk to you alone." I nodded, just before we heard Mom screaming. I started to rush forward, but several of my brothers seemed to know I was behind them. They turned simultaneously, with Nikolai putting his hands on my shoulders to pull me back while they pushed me back. I didn't protest. I let Nikolai pull me back against him while he moved his hands into mine. Dad and Anton were pulling something inside the entry while two of my other brothers were moving Mom away from the door. I wanted to know what was happening, but Nikolai was with my brothers in keeping me back. It was a few moments before I realized Kasia was being escorted to the door. Suddenly I knew what was happening in front of me. Tears started. I couldn't stop them. I was against Nikolai when they started. He pulled me into his arms and moved me away from the door and the others. Just as he did, Kaja screamed and then started crying. I went to turn, but Nikolai was determined and removed me from the scene until I was ready for details. He moved me into one of the unoccupied rooms and sat me in a chair. Kneeling before me, he looked up at me saying, "You don't have to see it. I know this is going to be hard, but if you want me there, I'll be there for you. I mean, we just met, but I feel like I've known you and your family forever. I just want to help, especially you." I didn't think about the mess that I must look like. He moved close, pulling me back into his arms and embracing me. He let me hold on to him as I sobbed. As I calmed down, Jarek and Katja joined us. He was sitting in the chair with me across his lap and my head on his shoulder. Jarek pulled up 2 chairs for them before they started talking. I got my own chair and pulled it close to Nikolai before I sat. I felt safe with him, which said something significant to me. Katja started by saying, "I'm sure you want to know why I asked you here tonight. There are a lot of reasons you are here now. I hate that this took so long to happen. Mom and Dad knew your parents. They actually looked for you a long time after the accident. I'm sorry they didn't find you before now." Now I was confused, but so was Nikolai, as he said, "What do you mean, knew my parents? My blood family?" Jarek nodded a bit as he spoke. "Yes, the Petrovins knew your blood family. Stefan and Katerina were going to talk to you themselves, but with this tragedy, they asked Katja and I to do it. They didn't mean to lose you to the system. They wanted to bring you in and raise you with your own kind." I moved slightly, looking from the 2 of them to Nikolai. Was he actually one of us? I noticed his eyes narrowing. Something wasn't right in the look he was giving them. "One of you?" he said, his voice starting to show signs of annoyance as he spoke my thoughts. "What do you mean I'm one of you?" Katja was not happy with this change in his demeanor. Her hand reached towards mine. I started to move my hand to hers, but Nikolai caught it and held my arm just above my hand. I was caught. He was not going to let me go. Jarek broke in, saying, "You're what we call a lost pup. I know it sounds demeaning, but it just means you were lost from the pack. Now we want to bring you back, give you the place you should be. Over the next 4 days we can talk more about the semantics, but have no doubt you're a wolf. You're one of us, or you wouldn't have heard Danica think that question. I smelled it on you when you first came into the shop," Katja said as she tried to calm her panic. "It's why I invited you. I have no idea why Danica didn't smell it too." That was when I realized why I recognized his smell. He smelled like us under the smell attached to his clothing. The other smell had been his human family. That's why it was different yet familiar. I'd never been around real humans. I didn't know exactly what they smelled like. He looked at me as he said, "You're wolves? All of you?" I swallowed. He wanted me to answer, so I said, "Yes, we're all werewolves." "A family of werewolves?" he said, shaking his head. "I thought I was the only one. I had to hide it from my family since the first time. You're telling me my parents, my blood parents, were werewolves too?" "Yes," said Jarek, starting to share Katja's fear that Nikolai was going to hurt me. "If Stefan and Katrina could have found you before now, they would have brought you in then. You don't know how sorry all of us are." "Did you know?" Nikolai said to me. I looked at him blinking as I said, "I knew we were looking for a lost pup from the niche pack, but I didn't know it was you. I had no idea." "Okay," he said, cutting me off. "So you wanted to find me and bring me back. So what was that out there?" "That isn't related to this," Jarek said. "Wait, did Stefan say something to my foster parents about this?" There was a look that went between Katja and Jarek that told me the answer before Jarek said, "They knew something about this, but they were told that we were family to you and that we had been looking for you for a long time. He also warned them not to put up the decorations and of the situation of tonight and the next 4 days," Katja said, continuing Jarek's answer. "They chose to ignore the warnings." "So what is this all about?" Nikolai said, waving his free hand while pulling me closer. What has werewolves scared to leave their homes for 4 days, and to have that silent half hour? We all looked at each other. All of us knew better than to name the creature by name. Jarek was the one who broke the silence, saying, "We don't say its name. You could say that it's a hateful cousin to the banshee, the wolf, with a father many would identify as Krampus. Of course, it's more complicated than that, but it's the best way I can explain it right now. Yes, we fear it." I put my head down, imagining what had been done to Andrik. I could feel the tears starting again, so I fought them. "You said Stefan warned my foster father," I heard Nikolai say. I had not missed the shift from calling him his father to his foster father, nor the drop of irritation in his voice. "Yes," Katja said, frowning. "We had hoped that he would at least listen some. We cannot know for sure, not until we can leave the house again." He nodded. He could accept that somehow. He was still having trouble believing there was something out there that werewolves feared so much we wouldn't even speak its name. This brought a memory of the creature to my mind from a night when I was little. I had snuck out of my bed to look out the window on the second night of the 4-night seclusion. It was snowing. I wanted to see the snow outside. When I looked outside, I looked at the snow with a happy joy you have as a child. Then I saw what my family feared. He was standing turned to the side in the snow looking at our house. He was on 2 legs like a human, but had the partial form of a wolf with the legs of a goat. His tail was a wolf tail, but his flattened face, though similar to that of a werewolf's hybrid form, was gaunt and almost skeletal. He had no horns, but he did have a large ridge of what appeared to be bone running from the base of his neck up and over to his forehead. It was like a spine that continued over his skull to his face. The darkness where his eyes should have been was just dark. I didn't know if there was anything actually in his eyes. His feet were not hooved like a goat, but were paws, and his hands were not paws or hands. They were claws, with long extended fingers and nails which were like talons. There had been some snow and blood in its matted fur that night. I don't know still whose blood it was, but my fear made me sneak my way back to my bed, trying not to make a sound, though everything within me wanted to scream. All these years later, this image still scares me. Nikolai saw the image in my mind, letting him see what I had seen all those years ago. He pulled me close to put his arm around me to comfort me. Strangely, I did feel comfort from it. He turned and looked at me with those impossible green eyes again, as he said, "It's not going to get you. No one is going to hurt you, okay?" The rest of the conversation was calm. Nikolai accepted what Katja, Jarek, and I were saying. When we left the room, it was with him fully understanding what he was and how it related to us. He pulled me back as Katja and Jarek went to find my parents. "Danica, why can I see and hear your thoughts, but I can't hear theirs?" "I can't hear Jarek's either. Sometimes I can hear Katja's," I said softly. "That will end when they're mated. I won't hear hers at all, only he will." "What does that mean exactly?" "They're mates. Well, will be. Before we're mated, our family and parents can hear our thoughts, to a certain degree. I guess you can hear mine because we share some blood somewhere in the past," I said, not certain that was the reason myself. "But when we mate, our mate gets those intimate thoughts only, though the alpha can hear all our thoughts." "What's involved in finding a mate?" I shrugged and said, "I keep being told you just know. I don't know how true that is, but it's all I have to go on." He shook his head as he said, "The only thing I know for sure is I belong here. I felt it when I first met you. Meeting your family made it even more certain to me. Still, there's more to it. I want to protect you, especially from that monster that haunts your mind, the one outside that hunts us and did whatever he did to your brother." I grinned while I nodded, saying, "So much has changed for you today. I'm the one that started it all, It's not surprising you would feel that way. Yes, I analytically challenged his thought process. Perhaps, he said, looking into my light blue eyes. However, I don't think that's what's going on. I guess we'll know as time goes on. I thought I would get lost in his eyes. I had to mentally pull my head back as I said, I guess so. For now, can you go with me to see Adric? He wasn't happy with my request. To his credit, he said, let's see if they'll let you see him now. We made our way to the room they'd moved Adric to. Anton was standing outside the door. He shook his head as we approached. I don't think this is a good idea, Danica. Kaja's not handling this very well. Perhaps you should go see her and help Mom with her. No, Anton, I said, keeping my voice calm. I need to see this. I need to know what happened to him. He started to protest. She needs to see it, Nikolai said softly to Anton. Anton nodded reluctantly before opening the door to let us in. I paused a moment before I moved in. Nikolai followed me, still holding my hand, with Anton behind him. I moved to the table they put him on. There was a sheet covering him. My hand was shaking as I moved to remove the sheet, to reveal the torn body. It was obvious the creature had used its claws to disembody my brother. I stumbled backwards into Nikolai. Nikolai gasped as I did, saying, "Oh God." "Take her out," Anton said. He moved around us and pulled the sheet back over what I could only loosely call a body. Nikolai pulled me out of the room. He took me to the kitchen to get some water. He looked at me as I finished the water, saying, "So that's why you don't decorate for Christmas?" I nodded. Any decorations call those things to them. They do the same to anyone they find. So you think my foster family's dead? I lowered my head. I couldn't look at him and say what I had to. Yes, I'm sorry, but I do. It's okay, he said, lifting my head to look at him. I can handle it. They were warned. I wish they would have listened. In the meantime, I found my home. I'm at least happy to have met you all. So what are we going to do for the next 4 days locked in here? We quietly celebrate Christmas and family. You get to find out more about us. He smiled as I spoke. Though every night hopefully won't be like this. It is usually not this bloody. I like the sound of that.